Welcome to Money Matters TV. My name is Paul Mitchell. I'm a commercial banker. I'm your host for this show. My co-host is James Chan.
Hi, Paul.
James is founder, CEO, and head honcho of Asian Marketing Company.
Right. Asia Marketing and Management.
And management
you want
company.
to be really picayune about it. Yes.
Well, sounds like a full-time job
Right.
to me.
It is. Has been for a long time.
Well, James, with that kind of business, which is advising companies how to work with Chinese companies and in China, that type of thing, sounds like there's an awful lot of travel involved.
Oh yeah. Well, particularly when I was younger. I mean, I started my practice, which I now call Asia Marketing and Management, in 1983. And in the beginning years, and even as of now, my goal, my main focus is to help American companies sell, market, promote American-made, 100% American-made products, and then later on services to China and other Asian countries near China. And I did this because for 2 years I was with a large Fortune 500 publishing company, Harcourt Brace Yovanovitch, in New York City. And I learned how to sell books and journals, very high level English language, highly academic, journals and monographs to Asia, and I succeeded in doing it. And one day I decided that instead of helping a company, I want to help myself.
And you became an entrepreneur.
I became an entrepreneur, even though I really do not like that word entrepreneur.
Well, you don't report
it
to
means
anybody.
Almost nothing nowadays.
Who's your boss?
Me.
You're an entrepreneur.
I know. I can't get out of it. Yeah.
Well, as an entrepreneur, we like to talk about entrepreneurs and how they interact with large business and that
Right.
type of thing.
Right.
And we mentioned about travel, and you have to travel to China and all.
Oh, yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about some of the things you run into in terms of dealing with, I guess, large corporate travel entities and entrepreneurial ones? I'm sure that between here and the airport and between the airport in China and where you're going, you're not just dealing with large entities, but there's entrepreneurs involved in the services they provide.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I have to say that in the beginning, in the early 80s, it was simpler. There were travel agencies, they were doing big business, and it was very easy to call somebody and you would have somebody who kind of plans everything for you. You really don't have to be anxious about where to go from point A to point B to point C and how much, and everything was taken care of. But over the years, it seems to me, on the one hand, you have all these .com companies and apps and things that seem to make life easier, things cheaper, but on the other hand, we have to do more of the work. We have to be sitting in front of the computer for hours, negotiating with not just the .com or app companies, but also with individual hotels. So I would say it's very yin-yang. It's both good and bad. It's not as easy as it was
And you're an
several
experienced
decades
traveler.
ago.
How many times a year do you go to China or abroad?
In the beginning, well, maybe 4 times a year, and because whenever I travel,
and every year.
Yeah, every year. Whenever I travel, I don't just go there and spend a few days. I try to be there for as long as I could. Piggyback different things, so I don't have to be just flying for the sake of flying. But there's one misunderstanding of what I do. It's not just traveling. It's knowing the people and then keeping in touch with them by phone every day. I call people more often than I see them, but I call. I don't email. I don't just email. I don't just send text messages. I call. I have long conversations, sometimes lasting for an hour, 90 minutes, sometimes 2 hours, talking to people. So that is very important. But back to the travel thing,
Is there an entrepreneurial opportunity to simplify things again? I mean, you sound like you like the travel agency concept.
I like it.
You make the one call, they take care of it.
I like it.
Well, is there something that people can do now to have the same thing?
Yes, they do, but if I am correct in psychoanalyzing a lot of people, they believe that they can save the money for themselves as opposed to spending some money asking for a seasoned professional travel agency to help them. I prefer the latter. I prefer helping somebody who knows what he or she is doing to help me and pay more, because it saves a lot of trouble.
Yeah. So all these apps and
They're
advisory
good,
things.
they're good. The
just-
hotel.com, this,
more work.
Airbnb, I have no problems with that, but it seems to me that the traveler has to do a lot of work. I mean, if you're willing to do the work, sure.
Well, everybody promises that you don't have to do the work. That's
That's
the issue.
They
I mean,
say
I'm
it's
not-
very easy.
I'm not as frequently a traveler.
Right.
And yeah, I'm oriented toward
Yeah.
trying to save a buck and making direct reservations with a B&B owner or a private residence or
Right.
or something like
I-
that, with mostly good success.
I like traveling with businesses of a certain size, because businesses of a certain size will put me in touch with their travel agency.
Okay.
So I don't have to worry about the logistics of many things that I consider. It's not in my bailiwick. I don't know how to deal with all the hotels and airlines and time their fares. I would rather pay somebody, and in this case, my client pays for me
Right.
to handle, to talk to a travel agency.
Yeah.
I prefer
Well, it sounds
that.
like good advice, and I guess I'll do a little segue. So, travel expense is a business expense. That's usually
yes.
tax deductible.
Oh yes,
And we
Well,
have a tax expert
we
with
hope
us
so.
today.
Yeah,
But
sure.
in the meantime, before we get to our featured guest, we do have a question from one of our viewers.
Okay.
And that question is from
it's-
Janet Smallwood, Philadelphia. She's asked, what are the best growth industries to invest in China? And since you go there frequently, you thought you would be the expert to answer that question.
Yeah. That's Janet.
It's Janet Smallwood.
Janet.
Yes.
Okay. Two-pronged answer. The straight and linear answer is actually quite simple. I mean, there are a lot of fields, industries in China that are growing, like tourism, education. I mean, tourism meaning a lot of Chinese have more money now. They want to travel and see the world. So that's a growing field. The other is education.
How would you invest in that?
Well, there are companies, businesses with new ideas how to promote the tourist industry. I'll get to that later.
Okay,
Let me enumerate the growth industries
Sure.
first. The other is education. You have more than 300,000 students from China studying in America alone. So that's another one. A third one is medical device and medical equipment, because again, more money in China have more money in China. More people in China have more money to spend, and they are aging. All of China is aging. So is America. So they want better devices, better equipment. So that's another one. And then robotics, high-tech industry. But that is the easy part of the answer. The harder, but actually to me, a better answer to you is, don't just focus on what particular growth industry there is. Focus on small businesses in China. What I mean by that is this. A couple of days ago, I read an article, very good article, written by Keith, a reporter at the New York Times, called Keith Brescher, Keith Bradser. Keith Brescher of the New York Times. The article was published on September 30th, and the title is, and I'm reading it, China tries to steer loan to small business. This is a very important article, and it answers your question. Why? Because for decades, I know, because I have friends who are entrepreneurs in China, and they have told me that they cannot get loans from banks within China. Chinese banks are more likely to give loans to Chinese government-owned, gigantic state-owned companies, government-owned companies. So if you are an investor, you should help people who need your money, who need your capital. Why loan to big banks of China, big companies of China that don't even need your money anyway, your capital? So therefore, second part of my answer is focus on small businesses in China that have noticed or that they have observed specific growth niches that is more logistically and operationally more beneficial to you.
Thank you, James. That
Sure.
sounds very, very insightful.
Yep. So
So if other viewers would like to pose a question to Money Matters TV, here's how to do it.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says Send Us Your Questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, M-O-N-E-Y, -matters, M-A-T-T-E-R-S, TV.com.
And now I'd like to introduce you to our featured guest this show, Rich Kelly of Brandywine Consulting.
Chad's Ford Accounting
Chad's
Professionals.
Ford.
That's close.
Close though. Welcome.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, Rich.
No problem.
Rich, sounds like you're a CPA and an accountant, and most importantly, and what's going to be the topic of I think our show today, is you're very involved with the Pennsylvania Society
Of Tax and Accounting
Tax and Accounting
Professionals. Yes, I
Professionals.
am a member of the Southeast chapter as well as the president of the statewide organization. We have about 1,900 members. We are not limited to one professional license or designation like CPA, PA, enrolled agent. So we're open to all those who actually are in our profession. Most are either sole practitioners or small firms that do more tax and some accounting, some financial statement work. But and we're much more than just an advocacy group, because we also provide a means for people to get together, get education. We sponsor our own education, as well as we facilitate a way to spread expertise around so you're leveraging the value of your smaller firm, because let's face it, no one's an expert on everything.
Rich, are there other similar sounding type organizations in Pennsylvania?
There are, and some of those are limited to one specific license type. We decided that wasn't necessarily the proper path for us, because there's a lot of people in our industry that, they may have a federal license, they have a state license, or they may have no license whatsoever, but nonetheless they still need support, advocacy, and a way to develop talent and information.
So I could hang a shingle outside my door and say, I'm a tax accountant, and have people come in and I'll do their tax returns?
There's a lot of people like that out there, okay? There's a lot of what we call the kitchen table types, okay?
How many? I'm just curious. How
Well,
many?
now that the IRS requires you to have a
estimate.
PTIN, there's over 700,000, there's
What? 700,000?
PTIN holder. In other words, they used to have your social security number or federal ID number.
Right.
Now instead of your social security number for prepare going to tax return, it's a PTIN.
Okay.
So it protects your social security number.
I see.
Not that everybody's isn't out there now, but yes, there's no restrictions. The IRS tried to put some in, and they lost a big case over it. But no, there is no barrier to entry as far as having to have a basic license, like a barber has to have.
You mean
Or an attorney?
You mean
Right.
let me make sure, Paul, that I get this right, because it's such a fundamental concept, Rich. Are you saying anybody who proclaims that he or she is comfortable doing taxes for other people for pay can become an accountant?
They can be a tax preparer. There's
Tax preparer. But the tax preparer still has responsibility. I mean,
some do.
oh
Well, in other words, it's just like anything else. You need to know something about maybe the person that you're entrusting all this information to.
But how does a customer know whether a particular tax preparer is qualified?
Well, in my case, there are people like myself who's, I'm a licensed certified public accountant, which
Right.
means I have some sort of responsibility
Right,
as
right.
far as my license is concerned.
Right.
Some people, the only thing that matters to them is how much is it going to cost them, and
Right.
in all honesty, you get what you pay for a lot
Yes,
of times,
yes.
and so you're not always getting the best tax advice from someone who just buys a tax software product and wings it.
Okay.
Well, it's almost a generic thing. People trust what they think are professionals. In every industry, in every profession, there are good ones, some are not so good, and some aren't good at all. Whether it's a doctor, lawyer, banker, international consultant,
Reputation is everything, and
Right.
and so are
and
referrals.
ethics and
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
Sure.
And related to that, earlier, Rich, we had this short conversation about the importance of being part of or being a member of
Right, of a professional society.
organization or
right.
society. I fully agree with you, but I want you to say it, to explain it to the viewers in your own words. Why is it that important?
It's important because someone like myself who's with a small firm and many of our other members who are just sole practitioners,
Right.
Many of us have many 20, 30, 40 years of experience.
Right.
But tax codes, federal, state, local, are very intricate, oftentimes very complicated, and you will not see every issue even in the course of your lifetime. So you may come across an issue that you're unfamiliar with.
Right.
So being in a professional group like ours, we have a listserv, so I can post a question and that other members will look at
Right.
and say, oh, somebody might look at that and say, I've done that 10 times. This is what you have to do. Or if you're looking for contact information at a state or local taxing agent, this is who you're going to talk to. So it's a way that we share our expertise so you don't have to know everything.
So it's almost like a highly specialized niche LinkedIn for
It
members
is.
of a society.
And you'll find that like where our practice is, we're near the Pennsylvania-Delaware border. I do a lot of PA Delaware work,
Right.
but somebody else might not, and all of a sudden they have an issue. Somebody's in Delaware and Pennsylvania at the same time. What do I do?
Okay.
And so maybe I'll get involved with their question or answer, or someone else like myself, or maybe I have an issue with New York and PA, and I'm the opposite end of the state, so maybe somebody from Scranton will get involved with an answer. For
I
me.
have a tough question for Rich. I don't mean to be tough,
Okay.
but it's just
Go right
it's the
ahead.
fundamental basic.
Right.
Earlier, you said that there may be as many as 700,000 independent tax
Well, there's-
preparers, just
Right.
people, individuals, and yet that's one hand. On the other hand, you have your society, the society that you head, that has 1,900 members.
Right, and we're
So-
primarily all in Pennsylvania.
Right, I'm talking about
Right.
Pennsylvania. So there's a big gap, between 700,000 and
Well, the
close to
700,000 isn't
2,000.
necessarily in Pennsylvania, but
Oh,
what I'm
oh,
trying to
oh,
tell you is that
Okay.
that there's an awful lot of people that
Right.
have. First of all, there's a lot of people that hold CPA licenses that don't do tax
Okay,
work.
okay,
If you
I
look at the
gotcha.
large firms,
Okay.
they're in the multi, audit, tax, advisory.
Yeah.
So they're not all their CPAs do taxes.
Okay, I see.
More so at the smaller firm area, most of us are primarily geared towards tax because
Yeah.
it's something that everybody has to do.
Well, here's a layman's question. So if you're focused on taxes, what do you do the other 10 months of the year?
Oh, well, first of all, taxes don't go away, all right? And it's not just tax, there's tax planning, because guess what? If you come to see me in March, well, there's not a lot I can do about last year, except report it properly. But as far as planning goes, well, you want to do that in advance. And sometimes it works out. Sometimes I don't know what these people in Washington are going to do for this year, and this year's almost over. I mean, this happens. We get tax laws
Yeah.
extended the last day of the year.
I see.
People ask, well, should I buy the equipment? I said, well, I don't know if the 179 deduction is going to be available. And unfortunately, that's the world we live in. But there's more to it. Besides the tax planning, there's all these tax agencies, whether it be the IRS, the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue. They have their audits of tax returns, and people get letters. Millions of letters go out from the IRS every year. Most of them are automated, and the face-to-face audits with the IRS, there's just not that many of them. Or most are just what they call correspondence audits. People get a letter and they need some response and you need an answer, and that's what you do.
Well, talking about the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue,
Okay.
what's your
Well,
thought about how much they're going to continue doing audits and that?
Well,
type
here's
of
what
thing?
happened this year. The Pennsylvania Department of Revenue several years ago aligned themselves with a data company, and they started doing reviews or audits of unreimbursed employee expenses. And they were actually done on a contingency basis where the data company
So I work for a company, I drive my car somewhere, the company doesn't reimburse me, I write off that expense of that trip.
that's the biggest expense is oftentimes mileage, meals, lodging. It could be if you're in a trade union, union dues for some of the trade unions are quite substantial. So there's a lot of things that go into unreimbursed employee expenses. Some education issues that you may have to take to keep your license active or whatever. But that was the first like opening salvo from the Department of Revenue. And they did that for a few years. Now this year, they've licensed the data search software from this company. They're doing it all themselves. And they decided to look at the Schedule C. Now the Schedule C is the typical form that someone who's an unincorporated self-employed person will file. So that's your self-employed income. There's a federal Schedule C. It's type of the same thing as PA. But PA decided to look at 8% of the personal returns that were filed that had Schedule Cs on them,
As opposed to
probably less than 1% in the past.
That's a big difference.
So it is a big difference. So it was over 42,000 returns through August, because first of all, some people are on extension, so they hadn't even filed yet. And they have 100 examiners looking at these, so there's not a lot of time assigned to each one. Pennsylvania also realizes now that this is a learning process, because it's the first time that they really took on something of this magnitude, and they believe they're going to learn a lot from this year. And getting back to the professional society issue, because a lot of our members were having clients that got letters from the Department of Revenue saying, we need this, this, and this, and you have 15 days to get it to us. We approached the Department of Revenue, who we meet with every year anyway, and I and my executive director and another member, we sat down with the deputy director for Department of Revenue and the Pennsylvania personal income tax manager to go over this program and exactly what they plan to do. And they informed us, first of all, the 15-day, is kind of a soft deadline, and they were giving more time than that to get information. 15 days is not a lot of time.
Not
the
long
IRS
at
gives
all,
you a lot more.
The person or whatever filer has to contact their accountant.
Right.
Accountant's got to find a little time to address the issue, take a look at it.
Right. So and they don't want to be flooded with calls. I need more time. So they in essence they're saying, look, 30 to 60 days you're going to have before you get another notice anyway. So that was part of it, and we found out exactly what their criteria was. They looked at this analytically, and they decided if your cost of goods sold or some other major expense areas were out of the realm of averages. Keep in mind, there really is no average business out there, but maybe in total there's an average. Then you got selected, and you had to come up with certain information, typically on cost of goods sold. A lot of it was what's called other expense, which is a really catch-all of a lot of things. There's only certain lines on the form. A lot of things go into this other category. So they know they're going to learn from this, and we're hoping that they pare it down. But they're going through a modernization process on their end, and they expect to actually expand the scope down the road to other schedules for audit besides the Schedule E, or besides the Schedule C. And they selected the Schedule C because they believe that may be the area of biggest non-compliance.
I'm not delighted in asking this really, to me, boring and silly question, but lots of people may want to know. What differentiates your firm from any other? Why, if I were a potential customer, why would I want you versus him? What would you say to that?
Well, I would, the first thing, when someone calls and they're maybe looking for a professional, I'll start asking them about themselves and or their business.
Right.
And then I will try to relate to them experiences I've had with similar industries or people in the same industry. Or if they've been referred to me, that's a little different.
Yeah.
But I tell them, especially if they're cross-border, this is what I do. I I have a lot of
You mean
experience
foreign,
in
international?
well, cross-border as PA Delaware.
Yeah. Just to make sure.
And because first of all, let me just back up a little bit. All of us operate with the same federal tax code.
Okay.
But what confuses a lot of people is all the local, state, and local issues that as soon as you cross a line on a map, you've changed. So that being said, that's a big part of the compliance these days. Philadelphia has all their own tax codes. There's a lot of earned income tax issues in the suburbs, different tax laws. Pennsylvania, even though it has one tax rate, has multiple different types of classes of income, and you can't offset one against the other. So Pennsylvania actually has a fairly complicated tax system, even though they have a flat tax rate.
Rich, we're running out of time a little bit, but the big question everybody has in their mind is, are we going to see any comprehensive tax reform this year or the first 6 months of next year? I mean, I know you have a crystal ball of some kind.
I wish I did. I mean,
Crystal ball.
The last big tax reform we've had in this country was 1986,
Wow.
and we're still operating on what's left of the Tax Reform Act of 1986.
Over 30 years.
But everything has gotten so complicated and crazy since then that it's time, it's needed. But one of the things you have to remember is for every single little deduction that has to be considered, every deduction has its own constituency. So if you want to take away the state and local tax deduction or somebody's going to get upset. Some group of people is going to say, wait a second, I need this deduction. This is unfair. So to try to balance constituents who vote against maybe other constituents who vote, it's not easy for these politicians.
Sounds like healthcare. Yeah.
Could be.
Yeah.
Well, we could go on and on.
I'm sure we could.
You've got, since the tax code is
right.
is like this, and
growing,
and you know half of it.
Well, I hear it. I've been hearing it for years. We're going to simplify this. We're going to do this, and sometimes I just laugh, thinking, well, this is just more business for me.
Rich, I know this is almost like a stupid question. Do you really encourage people to do their own taxes?
No. In fact, I'm going to tell you a story.
Really?
My wife came home from work one day, and she said to me,
Yeah.
I got a question from somebody at work, and they said, what's the biggest mistake people make when they do their tax return themselves? And I said to her, doing their tax return themselves.
Saves a lot of money.
Because, maybe it saves a lot of money. Right. It could cost you a lot of money.
It sounds a little bit like a lawyer representing themselves as their own attorney.
Oh, okay.
So even professionals, as professionals they are, should generally engage in even another professional.
Well, not only that, but I like to tell people that my expertise may save them more than my fee. So that being said, that's why it's important, to seek professional
So
help.
I don't have to feel guilty that I don't do my taxes right.
I don't know anything about setting up a business in China. So you do what you do, and I do what I do.
Good advice for all of us. We have to wrap up now.
Okay.
Rich, thank you very much.
Thank
for
you so
appearing on the
much.
show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would just like to remind our viewers that your money matters.